Hi, I'm Earl Taylor, Chief Knowledge Officer at the Marketing Science Institute. As many of you know, MSI helps marketers become better marketers. Our business and academic thought leaders collaborate to create new marketing knowledge, which we share in a variety of ways, and one of the most popular is our online lecture series. Those of you attending today represent many business sectors such as consumer durables, manufacturing, retail, and financial services, as well as MSI members such as Colgate, Ford, UPS, DuPont, Walmart, and others. And we're delighted to welcome you to learn more about making sense of unstructured data. Before we begin, I'd like to point out the Chat with Presenter function in the left-hand corner of your screen. Please use this feature to send through any questions you have during the presentation. We'll gather the questions and have a brief Q&A session following the presentation. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's featured speaker. Matt Dodd is Managing Partner of Kantar Analytics practice with over 20 years of experience working on product and top issues such as brand ROI, data integration, social digital analytics, as well as AI and predictive analytics. Prior to joining Kantar, he led Nielsen's European marketing analytics team of over 50 people, where he worked on similar topics. Matt has a wealth of client-side experience with a number of media companies, where he led the transition from print publication to multimedia organization by bringing consumers into the heart of the business. Matt has a master's in management from the Judge Institute, the University of Cambridge, and a bachelor's in business from Manchester University. And he'll be sharing with us today his thoughts about analyzing text, images, sales, and unstructured data to understand consumer preferences and predict trends. So Matt, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Earl, and good afternoon to you all. Many of our clients are currently in a state of FOMO panic, that there's this perpetual fear of missing out on the big data opportunity. We too in the research industry also fear that our jobs are doomed to vanish as the machines will take over. This view is not just held in our industry but across many others. In fact, last year I attended a session at the London Science Gallery where the art exhibition was entitled "Humans Need Not Apply," with a tagline, "In an automated world, is it nearly time to put humans out to pasture?" Really, as technology becomes more advanced and work can be performed by computers, we, particularly in the marketing and market research industry, are largely comfortable with AI taking on repetitive, simple tasks, but are we as open as the art industry is in shaping the way that we do our business going forward? This is the key challenge for us within the marketing and market research industry. So is this the look of the future, as we have a raft of empty desks in our offices? Where should we start? For Kantar, we have a wide range of services, from consultancy to qualitative to cultural insights, future trends, advanced analytics. So where do we start with AI? How could we make it happen? These were the questions that we were bubbling away with several years ago. To this end, we created Stan.
Hi, I am Emily, and this is Stan. He's great at helping me solve brand challenges around brand strategy, customer experience, innovation, and predicting performance. He's our award-winning analytics toolkit. Stan is continuously learning with every problem thrown at him. He is good with all sorts of data: images, maps, text, contextual, historical, and future trends. Do you want to see what Stan has mastered? Through analyzing images, Stan can identify your brand, products, functional needs, emotional needs, and the ways consumers use your category. In a similar way, using natural language processing and the latest machine learning, Stan can make sense of what consumers are saying. With all of this information, Stan can give us a picture of your category and brand positioning. He can find the next big things that will change your category. He can also predict sales or brand equity, brand strategy, customer experience, innovation and performance. Stan is always here to help. To find out more, get in touch with Kantar.
So Stan is great. He's grown up fast, and he is structuring data. He's good with images. He can also help us understand trends. However, what Stan wasn't so great at is measuring emotions. And the more we think about his role in doing some of the work our teams do, the more emotions become an important element of his learning. So the question we had amongst the team was, how could Stan better decode and understand human emotions for us? And this is the challenge we set Stan. Our first attempt was actually not with voice, but actually through text. We didn't look at emotions, but we looked at the way consumers were commanding, asking, or being friendly with Alexa. What we found was that very much Alexa is still not a member or family member of the household, or a friendly device, but still as a very, we're using it in a very demanding way. The next attempt we undertook was to better understand through personality of the text that people were putting into social media, and we utilized Watson's personality tool to better understand the way that they were actually writing, the language that they were using, to better understand how brands could communicate their needs better in terms of labeling, in terms of expansive language, in terms of language nuances. And finally, our third attempt was for a bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, where we actually decoded voice. We utilized new technology that enabled us to better understand the way that people were talking behind the interviews, to better understand the emotions that they were displaying around a specific topic of employee engagement. From this, we were able to decode 4 different voice dimensions: the tempo, the tonality, the loudness in the voice quality. We also married this with the text analytics to understand the meaning behind what was said. One key learning was that we've still got a long way to go with voice, and perhaps the use case that we had was perhaps not the right use case for voice. We also uncovered that at the moment there's only 3 emotional structures that were able to be decoded: one of anger, one of interest, and one of laughter. And these are quite blunt for actually decoding human messages. And in fact, anger is probably more in the vector of dissatisfaction with the organization rather than anger towards the bank. What is emerging is this need for us to have better and sharper tools to measure emotion and in particular voice, and perhaps look at other use cases rather than employee engagement to understand what's being said, what's being behind what's being said, rather than the text itself and the emotions. What we did uncover, though, was the ability for us to delve more into the qualitative side of the research industry. And what Stan enabled us to do was classify at scale and at speed what a human qualitative researcher would do in many, many hours. It also brought more objectivity to the analysis and enabled us to do this in a much, much quicker way. One of the other findings was that we still need to prompt the technology and make sure that when the interviewer passes to the respondent, that there is enough cues to enable them to actually not allow the conversation to be too mungled to understand who's saying what within the voice analysis. So lots to do, and clearly it will not replace the role of the qualitative researcher, but it will enhance the role of the qualitative researcher to do more of the so what and less of the grunt work of putting the analysis together. So We see still great strides to be undertaken within the voice arena, but great opportunities to enhance our qualitative areas of the business. The other area that we wanted to extend Stan into was into the government. And governments tend to be very nervous about using new technology. The quality of the sample is always a key issue. And we've worked for many years with many government organizations who are very reserved about embracing new technology to understand what consumers want from them. And this was a study that we undertook last year for DEFRA. And DEFRA's role is threefold. It's to provide a cleaner, healthier environment by benefiting people in the economy. It's to create a world-leading food and farming industry, and to drive a thriving rural economy, contributing to the national prosperity and well-being. And they came to us and said, could you analyze social data and get us to better understand the motivations of people visiting our outdoor spaces that we look after? What are the key motivations, the key behaviors associated with those visits? And also, what are the key environmental concerns that we need to stay abreast of, and where are those issues being triggered from? So we undertook to analyze 2.4 million conversations over a 6-month period last year across a plethora of different social media. And what we discovered was that in terms of the key places and the key activities, what we found was, in terms of actual outdoor activities, on the left-hand side, not surprising, cycling, walking, camping, sailing and fishing were the most talked about places. But the activities, and the most talked about places were woodlands and urban parks. But what we were able to do was go beyond that and look at the intersection between and the interactions between the environment and those activities. And here you see that obviously, for example, we see that walking is often talked about, in particular at woodlands, and running is often talked about in the sense of urban parks. But we could go much deeper than this. And what we were really looking to do was better decode the conversations using advanced NLP to understand what were the motivations behind those natural places. So DEFRA could have a better understanding of the way to communicate, the way to stay abreast with these emerging needs, and understand what people were seeking to achieve out of their visits to these natural places, and what they need to do to communicate better the benefits of those rural places. And what you see here, relaxation was one of the key motivations for natural places, and this really emanated in beaches, whereas harmony and being in one with your environment and your well-being was really coming out in woodlands. So this helped DEFRA have a much better understanding of the way that it needed to interact with the public, and the way that it needed to evolve its natural places. The second layer was to look at what were those conversations about the environment, and what were the key issues that consumers were really worried about, so DEFRA could better understand what they needed to do to counteract and evolve their communication in terms of the way that it responded to these needs. And what you see here is that clearly there was a lot of sentiment around wildlife and the benefits of wildlife, the benefits of recycling or conservation. These were counterbalanced by such issues such as fracking, which is quite an important new area of concern for UK residents as more fracking sites come open. Climate change, pollution and fumes were also areas that really were causing issues for UK consumers. What we then did is to understand what was driving those conversations. Was it organizations, people, TV programs? And here you see that on the top right quadrant, in terms of volume of conversation and positivity, you see that various charities, various TV programs were really where people were having a positive view around those topics. And in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you see the role of governments and politicians were really not helping the cause in any shape or form. In particular, Mr. Trump and Mrs. May were not helping the whole conversation. And for those who don't know, Michael Gove is a Tory MP and Caroline Lewis is a Green Party. Interesting, the Green Party wasn't breaking through in terms of positivity around the key environmental issues. So this again gave DEFRA a real blueprint of understanding where those topics were emanating and how they had to sort of grasp those. And one of the big factors obviously was Blue Planet and David Attenborough, and we saw a big spike in the whole notion of recycling, which has really not only engendered the government but also the private sector to embrace recycling here in the UK. So we challenged Stan to look at emotions, we challenged Stan to look at government issues. The next thing that we wanted to do was let Stan have a party. And like all of us, Stan likes a drink. He likes to go out and enjoy himself. So one of our clients, a whiskey brand, was really keen to understand how consumers were talking about whiskey in a social context and how they could reposition their high-end brand in this context, because they felt that they were not resonating or not clearly positioned digitally for growth. So what we did is we harnessed over a 2-year period about 1.2 million conversations from about 350,000 unique consumers, and we distilled that over a 2-year period in the category of whiskey, and that's whiskey spelt with an E and whiskey spelt without an E. And to consumers, they don't really care how the whiskey is spelt. They just like drinking about it and talking about it. And what we were able to do, and this is the other great advantage of obviously AI and machine learning, is we were able to harness those 1.2 million conversations and bucket those into 10 key dimensions. We were able to look at the different brands, the different products. Was it single malt? Was it blended malt? Was it bourbon, for example? Lifestyle, we were able to decode the conversations and bucket those into urban versus countryside. Benefits, what were the benefits that were coming from drinking whiskey? Was it fun, happiness, connections? Product features, we're looking at the origins of the product, and we looked at the ingredients, we looked at the value perceptions around those brands, different occasions, and also different emotions. And we were able to distill that down into 10 key, those 10 key dimensions were then distilled down into what we call 5 lenses, and this is where the human element comes into Stan, where human intelligence enables us to better understand, based upon our understanding of the category, our understanding of brands, and our years of work at Kantar in terms of building frameworks, enables us to put those into a context in terms of 5 key lenses. So what are the key needs and trends that are surfacing? What are those key territories from a consumer point of view? What are the key occasions? Where in the journey are those occasions happening? What are the key moments that are happening around enjoying whiskey? And what are the kind of segments or tribes behind those conversations? I'll give you a very small snapshot of the findings, so you get a flavour, use the pun, of what we were able to unearth. First and foremost, what we found were 3 distinct occasions. From the right-hand side, which is really what we call as the entry point into the category, you can see here that it's all about the party, it's all about going out the weekend, it's all about getting drunk, it's all about consuming, in this case, bourbon, Jack Daniels and Jim Beam, also Irish whiskey such as Jameson. And again, it's not about the whiskey moment, it's about the weekend and having a great time. And obviously whiskey is then competing with vodka, with rum, with other alcohol brands. So this is really the entry point into the category, and where we see some of the more mass market brands emerging. In the middle middle area, what we see is more about the blending of events and whiskey. And one of the key events during the calendar year was Father's Day. And what you can see here is the emergence of some more interesting, discerning brands appearing around these events, these key events throughout the year, such as Christmas and New Year. So there's an opportunity for brands to really sort of own and get closer to these events. One of the interesting things is around anniversaries, and this was an interesting occasion which no brand was really honing in on. And clearly, as we move into a more personalized, digitized world, there's an opportunity through digital personalization to potentially own that occasion. So that's something that surfaced from the analysis. And then when we move across to the left-hand side, this is all about whiskey. This is all about the connoisseur. And whiskey is first and foremost, and the events are part and parcel of that whiskey moment. So, for example, we had trips to distilleries, we had masterclasses, we had Burns Night, obviously very important here in the UK. But clearly, the emergence of more connoisseur, single malts, and it's all about imbuing yourself with the occasion and imbuing yourself with the brands that most closely associate with those events. The real opportunities for brands to better understand those moments, those occasions, and also how they're positioned. So that's just one example of how we got closer to uncovering those occasions. What we felt was we needed to go deeper still, so we analyzed the images. So we ran the images through our image analyzer, and this enables us to decode what's behind the image, what's inside the image, not just look at the hashtag, but also go much deeper and understand what's inside and what's happening inside the image. And clearly, what you see here, unfortunately, with GDPR, I can't show faces, but what you've actually got on the left-hand side under celebration is two females. And so one of the interesting moments that came out was this notion of celebration around specific events. This one specific event was around a birthday, and really it was two women that were also consuming whiskey. So really there's an opportunity to, for as an entry point, not just to think around, men, this is a male-dominated territory, but clearly with anniversaries in mind, there's a potential to utilize women to enter into that anniversary opportunity, which I talked to before, and look to, to take their partners on tours, etc., etc. Another key moment that we found was togetherness. And in the UK, that togetherness was really around outside. It was around, this image here was people drinking whiskey around a fire. Obviously, we need to keep warm here in the UK. Also, we saw lots of togetherness and distillery visits, people in an outdoors environment. In the US, the togetherness moment was around things such as food. It was also much more indoors. And we also saw the emergence of cigars as another sort of area of opportunity between smoking and drinking. So very different togetherness moments that we saw across territories. But really what we're able to do through image analysis and analytics is better understand what are those opportunities that brands could pivot towards. The next layer was to get deeper into understanding what are the typologies and what are the kind of micro-segments that were emerging through the analysis. And in order to do this, we took the Twitter handles and we worked with a third party that was able to enrich those Twitter handles with a deeper understanding of those individuals' wider lifestyles and behaviors. So beyond the category, looking at lifestyle psychographics and other types of lifestyle types to get us a better understanding of their wider behaviors. And what we saw here, there were 6 key segments that emerged, and these are two of the most important ones. Excuse my plagiarism of the English language here, but outdoorsy folk is, as you can imagine, people that love being in the outdoors, love going on walks, going to beautiful parts of the country. And for them, whiskey is part of that whole occasion, is part of that whole adventure. But whiskey is not first and foremost, but there's an opportunity to tie whiskey moments to those types of lifestyles and those types of events. The other group that's really important is what we're calling foodies, or discerning individuals who like high quality food. And what emerged was, if we just analysed the conversations, we wouldn't have actually created these two typologies. It's only by taking those typologies and enriching them did we get that deeper understanding of who's behind the conversation. So from a marketing perspective, what this enables us to do is better understand the communication vehicles and the media that individuals were most likely to be utilizing for those types of in those segments. And here for the foodies, we saw very much they were discerning, quality, travel was important, style was important, fashion. And when we actually analysed some of the publications, we actually saw, in some magazines, the blending of architecture and whiskey. We saw the blending of fashion and whiskey and other alcohol brands. So there's a real merging between the lines between, what you think is a specific magazine pointed at a specific area, and the ability to understand how the brands are actually getting closer to those environments is really key from a marketing point of view. So that's how we got Stan to have a party, to better understand, a brand's need to better understand its positioning in the marketplace, how it could better communicate with its consumers, and what were the types of typologies of individuals behind those specific conversations, and what were their sort of media and wider consumer behaviors. So a really rich understanding for that brand, for them to really understand where they need to position their brand going forward. But what Stan has been doing, most of Stan's emphasis over the last couple of years has been to help brands make sure they don't miss out on the next big thing, whether that's the new popcorn moment, whether that's the new matcha moment. And brands are coming to us, help us, to ask us if we can help them in their innovation agendas. And, this is a big challenge for brands as things go faster and opportunities are more readily available through digital. What are the things that brands should really focus on? So, the key questions we get asked are, what does the trajectory look like? Where is it emanated from? How important are the macro trends in terms of those adjacent benefits? What stage is that trend in? And what is the key recipes for success? And again, I go back to the very beginning of the presentation. Do we fundamentally believe a machine can answer all these questions? And the answer is clearly no. So at Kantar, for many years, our consulting teams have been working with brands to better define the trend innovation space. And working with our Kantar consulting colleagues, what we're able to do is to plot those social dialogues, those social conversations against those frameworks. And this is a key differentiator for Kantar, in that we've worked for many years understanding those innovation opportunities. And by applying those frameworks to the social data, we're able to better understand the trajectory, velocity, and the opportunity for brands to capture those new trends. And obviously there's lots of sensitivity around that, so I can't show you too much. But just as a snippet, we worked with a major FMC food manufacturer across multiple markets and helped them to understand what the opportunity was in this example in India, in terms of both in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. And what you see here is, in the short term, applying the conversations by the different different areas of eating. So we mapped street food, we mapped restaurant food, we mapped take-home food, we mapped in-home dining against those. And what we saw was Italian food is already fairly big, but it's growing as the second biggest cuisine in a number of territories within India, with pizza and pasta and other niches slightly further behind. So in terms of the ingredients that this manufacturer was thinking about bringing to the market, Italian was something they were already looking at. But really, for the long term, what they were interested to do was what would I need to put my bets in terms of the long term? So what do I need to look at in about 2 years' time? And what we saw was a small but a very growing trend amongst Korean food, and in particular fusions like kimchi, and that's clearly something that manufacturer is looking at in terms of the ingredient set that they look to bring into the market further down the line. So this is something that we're working both on a one-off but a more continuous basis to try and keep abreast of those emerging needs. And one of the things that we are now looking to do is how can we help our clients do this and predict what those trends look like. And clearly we have access to shopper data, we have access to other data sets and client data sets that enable us to triangulate what we're seeing in the social world or what we're seeing in terms of consumption data, and also in terms of other data sets such as survey data sets, to get that rounded view of what the future looks like, which is a very tough thing to do. What's pleasing is there are a number of brands that want to partner with us and want to learn. And I think the big learning from this whole space is that it's a very iterative process, and anyone that claims that it isn't is not telling the full truth, because you really need to work closely with the client to understand those new opportunities. And it's not a press of a button in the old sort of market research world where you design a questionnaire, you put it to field work, it comes back, you analyze it. It really is a mutual program where you work hand in hand with the client and understand what's emerging from the initial data curation steps to then better define where those opportunities of interest are and train your AI tools to go deeper into those new emerging trends to uncover and pick those. And the great news is there are a number of innovators in the market from a client perspective that we're working with to help them answer that very question. And we are very grateful for their support. What's clear to us is that from a market research standpoint, harnessing digital big data helps us extend our portfolio and enrich our portfolio in terms of what we've always been famous for here at Kantar, which is helping clients build great brand experiences, build great brands, understand how brands are converting and maintaining their customer relations, and finally, what are the new trends that are emerging and how do I best capture those? So really, we're really focused on those three dimensions within STAN, and that's something that we feel that in addition to not only STAN, but also that human intelligence, those frameworks that I talked to, is really, really pivotal to bring to bear. And the human knowledge that we have, the category knowledge we have, the frameworks we have, is also supported by great partnerships, tech partnerships that we've set up. This is the only way we're going to stay relevant and ensure that we're not doomed in the future. And, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of noise in this area. There's a lot of hubris in this area. But really, it's about getting rid of a lot of these black boxes that, that are out there, and trying to demystify and simplify and show the human behind the machine really, really important, and something that we work really hard at here at Kantar to make sure that we do bring those insights into the frameworks and the understanding the clients have around their customers, their brands, and the way that they're performing. And really, it's about the synergy of purpose, data, and what is the business outcome that you're most looking for. And with that in mind, it's about making sure that you still have the ability to tell great stories and that you're able to take the clients with you in that journey. And with that in mind, one should never forget that even though Stan is great, we still have to work tomorrow. Technology vanishes jobs, but not the work. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Matt. That was great. Covered a lot of territory there and some really good examples. My guess is a lot of the audience today are either people who do the hands-on. Okay, hi to the audience. This is Earl Taylor at the Marketing Science Institute. Apologies to those of you we may have just lost for a few moments there. Matt was kind enough to be doing the webinar from London, and we seem to have lost the connection, but I hope and think he's still there. And I'll just briefly paraphrase the question that came out of a couple of comments that the audience had. That is the use of this approach with AI machine learning to really develop new categories, new ways of thinking about social media data that might go beyond testing more conventional theories of consumer behavior, and importantly then the notion of discovery, things that we might not otherwise have found in this type of data. So Matt, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, my views, Earl, and to everyone, is that it's really early in the journey, right? And anyone that claims to have cracked the code is still it's still not there, to be quite honest. Yeah, and we've got to be bold, and social will give you really interesting signals and really interesting elements that you need to enrich with other understanding and other frameworks. And I think that's really something that we work really hard at here at Kantar, because there's a lot of startups coming in terms of the promise, but we're finding more and more brands are coming back to us. We want that intelligence layer, that ability for us to frame it into the client question. And there's no doubt that there is amazing tech out there and amazing knowledge, that you can tap into. But framing that, bringing that back to the client question, is something that's really, really important. And as we showed on Emotion, it's still, there's still a lot to be done. But we're learning all the time, and I think that's the key message: to learn together with your clients and be bold enough to go into that territory. We've had clients who've come to us and just said, right, I want Stan, and we really like that boldness, and I think that's a real interesting kind of juxtaposition the industry's in. A couple of years ago, it wouldn't have been; those questions wouldn't have emerged. It would have been too fearful to have done it. So we're finding that actually the boldness of the clients is also really encouraging around this area.
It strikes me that it's a little bit like the food adoption cycle you had there. We're at the kind of the gee wow, it's interesting, tell me more, but we're not there yet. And I think that's actually good advice for all of us to kind of be gradual about the claims that are being made and how we approach this. A couple of questions maybe relate to pretty basic matter, which you may have touched on briefly, and that is the source of this data. I'm assuming that these are publicly available social chat rooms and that sort of thing where you're finding the data that you're analyzing?
Yeah, I mean, it's publicly available data. Sometimes clients also give us their web data or their voice of the customer data, obviously in a privacy compliant way, GDPR compliant. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing is that, we start with social and then we build out. We've done web, text, chatbots, as you've seen. We've also done Alexa. And I think that's the thing, there's a lot of data coming at us, and the ability to harness it and understand it is really, really what these tools, AI toolkits enable us to do. And by enriching those toolkits with great tech partnerships that enable you to go deeper is really, really pivotal. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. You know, I remember working in social listening, 15 years ago, and we couldn't get the alternate sentiment working, in China. Now there's, so much advancement in those areas that actually you can point that data to almost anything. Images, you can now get what's inside the image, and all this metadata is only enriching our overall understanding. So yeah, we start with publicly available data, and then we'll add layers and layers to that in terms, for example, that food example, we decoded recipes, so if we can decode recipes and we can decode menus, for example, or app data, then that only gets to get us a more rounded view of what's happening within those categories and those areas of interest. So yeah, I've answered that in a very long-winded way, but the more data, the better. Some is data hungry.
Well said, and actually you actually answered one of the questions I was about to ask, which is the use of this approach for analyzing images, video and static images, and it sounds like this is, again, at least on the fringes of the capability of Stan and these approaches to begin to analyze images that people may post, because famously a lot of online content is not verbal, it's videos and static images, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and on images, obviously we know that Instagram is gonna make it tougher to analyze Instagram going forward, but you get a lot of rich, as the whiskey case study showed, on blogs and forums, on Twitter, there's still a lot of good image data out there, and that's still, if I'm brutally honest, still a quali-quant approach, that you take those images, you decode those images. And I think that's the other issue is, once you've defined those segments or those occasions and moments, then you can run the images against that, and there are other use cases where you can use it for ad, you can go at an image level, whether it's ad testing or what have you. So those are things that we're obviously exploring here at Kantar, the approaches that are most appropriate. And it's not just, to run images per se, it's what is the use case that you really want to better understand what's going inside the images.
Yeah, good point. Actually, one of our corporate sponsors, Pinterest, talks about the fact that if you look at what people tend to avoid, you can anticipate kind of where they're going. It's not just their current interests. You can sort of imagine where this set of images might lead and then intervene in appropriate ways that feel like help rather than intrusion. So I think that's really critical to on an individual basis, as you begin to act on these insights, you can actually engage consumers in very creative ways. Paul had a question a few minutes back. I think that's an important one. To what extent can the analytics in Stan and your approach to this help us differentiate between what really is an emergent or a nascent trend and something that turns out to be kind of a fad or a flash in the pan? This is, many a CPG and other company have pursued what appeared to be an emerging trend only to find out that it really was more of a fad, and a lot of effort went into what maybe was not such a successful product or new idea. So your thoughts about distinguishing trends from fads?
That is the $64 million question, right? And there's no easy answer, there's no magic formula, right? But I think, as the adoption cycle showed you, you can take a lot of that error out of that, and clearly what emerges from being, an emergent trend to actually a real trend is also the dynamics of the market and how the brand actually adopts those opportunities as well. So it's a tough one, and one of the things that we do, we would love to, something we are really looking at and collaborating with a number of universities around, trend prediction, but it's really, really tough. And I think at the moment, often it's about not only the product, but the ingredients and understanding across categories. So at the moment, we're really focusing on detection, but I think as we get better and we spend more time in certain categories, whether that's beauty, whether that's food, I think we'll have a better understanding of those fads, and clearly the size of the prize, so we have access to consumption data, so we're looking at that. But often those trends don't emerge in those data sets as early as need be. So It's a tough one, Earl, and something that we are, really keen to look at. We also look at patent data, for example, to see what's emerging on that. So again, I called about the triangulation of data truths, right? So the more you can triangulate those different data points, whether it's patent data, whether that's recipe data, whether that's ingredient data, and then triangulate it with conversations that are bubbling in social media, you're probably going to get a better win opportunity than not, and that's really what we're kind of working with our clients, giving them the opportunity to say, hey, did you know, for example, in the skincare category that peach has bubbled up? What does peach mean? We don't know, but you have to look at that, what that means as a potential opportunity going forward, right? So it's incumbent upon the brands to also have an open mind to that innovation pipe as well. So that's something we work very closely with our clients to ideate around. And yeah, there's no silver bullet. Anyone that says there is if they cracked it, then fabulous. We'd love to talk to you guys. But at the moment, again, it's still, what are those emergent trends? How can we triangulate against different data sets? And what are those mega trends that are out there, and what are those sub trends within those mega trends that are coming through as well? So yeah, still a lot of work to do in that space, but we're working harder in that space for our clients.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it goes back to your comment at the end about the iterative nature of this process. It really is a back and forth with the client, and that raises a question I wanted to get to, which is to what extent might this type of technology evolve into a kind of a do-it-yourself solution? I'm thinking of, for example, in the survey research business that I came out of originally, do-it-yourself Survey Monkey, or in some of the testing methodologies. A lot of folks are using Mechanical Turk now to put online experiments out there, A/B testing and things. To what extent is and should this become a technology technique that the client can pretty much adapt and use for themselves, or what is the value of the market researcher as the professional interpreting those results? So that kind of goes back to your opening comment about the future of market research as a discipline. So your thoughts about the extent to which it could or should be evolve into a kind of a do-it-yourself tool, and the value that the researcher brings, or the research agency brings to that process.
Yeah, that's a big question. Thank you, Al.
Inquiring minds want to know. Yes.
Yeah, I got quoted on Twitter sphere about my response on that one. Yeah, no. So yeah, I mean, chatbots, Mechanical Turk, all these things are really new areas of opportunity to the market research industry, right? And how fast you go at those, and how you utilize those are things that obviously we're looking at, hard and fast here at Kantar. What I will say is that I think, more and more people will have AI tool sets baked into a lot of the solutions. They won't even know about it, right? The way that it codes open ends, it might be a press of a button. So I think, my answer to this is just in the way that Uber uses AI, you don't even know it. I think more and more the research industry needs to adopt that same model, right? How did it harness big data? How did it triangulate different data sets to get that more rounded view, right? And I think, putting that in the hands of a researcher is really super powerful. And, obviously at Kantar we're doing quite a bit of that thinking and work to allow our researchers to be more rounded in the way that they blend data. We're traditionally from the survey world, how they blend survey with qual with analytics. And I think that's the epicenter of great research, how you bring those together. So just like Uber does it for a great driver car experience, how do we do that from a research business? And we've got a lot of old piping and old mechanisms that need to sort of be retuned to enable us to do that.
No, I think that's a great answer, and an honest appraisal of where we are right now. I hope I pronounced this right. Sahashish had a question about, I'll interpret this kind of, the ability for maybe a competing brand to sort of game things if they begin posting on social media information, maybe derogatory about the brand, the focal brand that you're studying. To what extent can people sort of use social media and this type of analysis to, I'll use these words, to game the system? Is that a potential concern, and how would you maybe be able to spot that or avoid that?
Yeah, I mean, we have various tech partnerships that actually can go through and find, for example, fake reviews. Yeah, so I think the more fundamental issue is fake reviews rather than malicious. I don't think that the ratings and review services are more prone to that than these malicious reviews that are coming on about the brand. But clearly, you need to really go deeper and understand what's, how does that triangulate against other events and other things. I mean, for example, we partner with engagement labs, so we get also a sense of what's being said on the offline word of mouth as well as the online. So there again, we have the ability to understand that wider view of what's being said about a brand. So I think there's different techniques to get there, and obviously there's technology to find those fake reviews, etc. So yeah, again, it's about embracing these other data sets and tech partnerships to make sure that you do hone in on what's really driving that conversation and driving that brand interaction.
We've got a number of more questions coming in, but I'm going to end with one question that was raised earlier. I think might be of interest to some of our audience, and that is generalizing this approach and these kind of findings to B2B marketing, to B2B context. I guess a lot of the original social media sharing sites were really like user groups around technology and things. So presumably there's a rich source of data out there publicly available. If you had some experience working on data sets that look more at kind of a B2B purchase cycle or product interest.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. We did something, it's in the public domain. It won an award at the MRS a couple of years ago for Lloyd's, the banking group, and we actually were able to harness data and get over 16,000 SME reviews and comments around bank transfers. And from that, the cost of recruiting 16,000 small medium enterprise businesses, it would be far, far more expensive than actually harnessing that big data. And we've worked with an energy supplier, and we found some really interesting views in the energy sector. So no, we are working in the B2B area, and we have a big, rather large social media platform, a global platform that we're working with at the moment to better understand how they can how they can communicate with their smaller businesses. So they've obviously done a lot of work with bigger brands. So no, we are doing quite a bit in the B2B space as well.
That's great. And again, apologies to those of you whose questions we did not get a chance to ask live, but you have Matt's contact information there. You can reach out to him at Matt at analyticsuki@kantar.com. And again, I want to thank Matt and the audience for joining us today. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar soon. And as I say, if you have additional questions, you can reach out directly to Matt. Since 1961, nonprofit MSI has brought together the best minds in marketing from major corporations and top business schools around the world to improve business practice by applying science to marketing's biggest challenges. Thanks again for being part of our online lunch webinar series, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at our next event. Thanks again, Matt, and bye all.
Thank you all. Bye.